welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Today we are joined by Abhijit Iyer-Mitra. Abhijit, welcome to PGurus channel.
Thank you, Sri. Always a pleasure to be on your channel. And Aparajita also says hello.
So we're going to have some canine company in today's hangout. And these are some of the most well-behaved dogs that I've seen. They have not uttered a word yet.
Yes.
And oh, okay, she's already gotten bored.
Yeah, she's gotten bored.
Abhijit, today we are going to talk a little bit about a subject that we have not touched upon before, the impact of TikTok or Facebook on the security of a country, the security fabric of the country, and what are the cyber implications of the data collection that goes behind all the software that, that people are using in India.
Yeah. So there's several aspects to this, right? The first is that, India really isn't a cyber power in that sense. We're more of a cyber coolie. We do all the back office stuff, essentially the computerized BPO stuff that people do.
Right.
And there is some stuff that happens that is high end. The problem is those people largely stay out of the government radar.
Right.
And it's usually only the coolie organizations that command all the power with government because they're very flashy. They need that kind of, power projection in that sense to get policy made and so on and so forth. Now, what happens with all of this is that your policy making inputs in this country are of an extremely low level. They basically, what you're looking at is policy just for the sake of stopgap protection at any given point of time. So, for example, a few years back, because India didn't have a data protection law, there was a threat to all the BPO operators in this country. That Europe and America could not outsource BPO conversations to India unless India had a data protection law, and privacy laws. So what happened was, just for that, the government introduced a law. Now, it's an insurance requirement to have a law, but the point is there's absolutely no enforcement of that law. And I'll tell you why. Because do you remember that episode of where this porn website, they had videos from the Delhi metro of couples making out being leaked on this website. That's what it's specialized in. This happened after that law was introduced, and nobody was prosecuted under that law. Nobody got arrested, nothing at all. So what happens is that, first of all, there's a capacity deficit. Second, there's a comprehension deficit. And third, if you look at the caliber of people who are supposedly our cyber czars, you'll understand that one of them actually can't even type out his own email. He requires a PA, he sits behind him, and he takes 40 minutes to type out what you or I could in this gap of like 40 seconds at best. So this is the framework that we're operating under.
It confirms Rudyard Kipling's observation of India, that incompetents hang around longer in India than anywhere else. This is something that is across the board, and it's way too much to even mention. Unfortunately, we have to weed out these people. Otherwise, anyway, please continue.
But look, our current government views them as the be-all and end-all of all cyber wisdom. Right. So, there's that Donald Rumsfeldism. A chooses A, B chooses C. First raters choose first raters, second raters choose third raters. That, unfortunately, is the nightmare that we live in today. So I don't see us breaking that chain anytime soon. And whether we like it or not, these are our cyber, gods, if you want to call them that. These are the ones that make the regulations. These are the ones that decide on the enforcement. These are the ones that decide on not to enforce, as the case may be. Now, what happens in all of this is, I'm not even going to touch upon cyber crime and things like that, because that's a whole different ball game. I'm just amazed it hasn't become bigger than what it has in India. However, where we're missing the ball is in influence operations, right? Now, influence operations a la Russian interference in America's 2016 elections. Twitter does it. YouTube to a much lesser extent, but the biggest violator in this sense has been Facebook for a very long time now. And of course, Facebook purchases its way out of any discussion on its role because there is not a single conversation on cyber or with a government minister on it that isn't sponsored by Facebook, right? And obviously that itself prevents the hosts from, uh, you know, asking questions about Facebook or Facebook's role in
Inconvenient
certain things.
questions. Inconvenient question.
Exactly, inconvenient questions. So this is one thing that's playing out. Now, remember, this isn't a directed American government effort. This is a private corporation effort.
Right.
Because, they have their own liberal bias. Like, Jack Dorsey on Twitter is on record saying that Twitter isn't a safe place for, or conservatives in Twitter don't feel it's a safe place. We've all seen Facebook's bias and YouTube's bias. The thing is, they play out their own biases in India. Now, in India, you have something called the intermediary law that governs these people, right? Which is that they are basically content providers, and they're somewhere between a editorial platform and a content provider. So it's hazy. Now, the only thing you need to do to shut it down is tell them that, look, if you exercise any censorship rights whatsoever, we will treat you as an editorial body, and we will treat you as a foreign-owned editorial body and take penal action against you for things that inflame or don't inflame. If you do not censor, then we will treat you purely as a content provision body. And this solves the problems of a lot of countries around the world that certain groups face, that of censoring out the right wing due to this liberal bias. Of course, our government isn't smart enough to do any of that. And honestly, some of them are rank idiots, so they'll never do that. So let's then go on to the second set.
Well, one small point of observation on Facebook. I have often heard that Facebook, the way they filter out posts or they block, is that they have a software-based algorithm that kind of looks at the amount of complaints that come on a particular post, and then makes a call on whether to, blacklist the page sometimes, or just ask the page administrator to take down that post, or worse, if either of those things happen, well, let's say that it asks them to take down the post. Then the page administrator goes back and complains, saying that, look, there is nothing inflammatory about this, and I want a review. But the review itself was being done allegedly by a group out of Hyderabad, which Tariq Fatah, no less, alleged that these guys are, Islamist loonies, and there's nothing that will go past them, and everything will just get shut down. Meaning that a review is going to get you nowhere, and then you get talk points. And if this was being, I don't believe this has been addressed by Facebook yet. Furthermore,
well, look, hang on. Why blame Facebook for this? We shouldn't blame Facebook for this. This is the problem of the telecom department and our prime minister. All right. All he needs to say is, you decide. All right. I will be the only body, the central government of India will be the only body to issue censorship orders on certain web pages in India. If you exercise your censorship right, I will hold you criminally responsible for every piece of content that inflames tensions or whatever in this country. End of story. It's a very, very simple law. Does our prime minister not have the cognitive ability to understand that? Well, clearly he doesn't.
He lives, eats, and breathes social media. I'm sure he knows this stuff.
Well, I don't look, he eats, lives, and breathes social media, but I don't think he understands policy. And I think that's very clear from a whole host of decisions he's been taking. All right. They think of the first order of effects like GST, like demonetization, like Kashmir. They always think of the first order of effects. They never look at the second and third order of effects. Always problematic. So, I mean, let's not even get into their policy making. There is not one policy of this government that I actually liked particularly, except say Kashmir. And then, I have serious doubts about what's happening in the next phase. But let's go on to the second part of this argument, which is on what TikTok. The Chinese companies, exactly, TikTok, Chinese companies, but not just TikTok. We need to be careful about this. ByteDance also has another app called Hello, and all kinds of things that Chinese apps do. Now, Chinese apps, by law, they are required to share their information with the Chinese government. And when you store things like credit card information, this, that on a Chinese app, you're basically giving over your your financial details in essence to the Chinese government, which can be used, it can be weaponized at a later stage. You are basically, all Chinese apps are known as a rule to to collect something like 45 to 70% more data than a Western app. And why are they collecting all this data? Why do they need all this data? Because there's one thing, how there's this, a lot of racists, it's not racist, it's actually human nature, would say that, oh my God, all Indians look alike, or all Chinese look alike, or for me, all white men look alike, or white people look alike. That is a problem with biometrics. If the Chinese biometric sample only has Chinese people in it, it isn't able to pick a great deal of differences, and you can't market it across the world. So what they're doing is they're basically collecting your biometric data, different human samples from different parts of the world, and testing their algorithms on it. You're effectively helping a Chinese police state apparatus, a police state app to become more and more accurate, right?
That's right. That's right. I completely agree with what you're saying. It's profiling next level. Yeah.
Yeah. So people aren't even aware of that, and they just keep doing. Right. I understand that it seems like an innocuous dance app or a stupid video recording app. But understand there are so many consequences here, and the government really needs to start doing cyber education, cyber hygiene, and things like that, which they're not. I don't think they even understand the concept of educating a population. Because, one of the things I've noticed is, and this seems to be a genuine cyber media policy of the government of India, is that they love having, the external enemy in that sense. Facebook do outrageous things. Let Twitter do outrageous things. Let Rana Ayub and co come and say ridiculous things on Twitter, because then it allows us to polarize people around that, right? And that seems to be a deliberate, calculated strategy. This is why people like Kanhaiya Kumar and Shaila Rashid were created overnight out of no one. Who made them popular? It was the right wing that made them popular. Otherwise, they were nobody. They were nothing. So this is, it's great for elections, but it's not great for national security.
Well, the important takeaway from here is beware of what are the things that you're agreeing to when you are installing new software. You have to go through that long small print where it tells you that we have the right to do this, 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 this. And only if you're comfortable with that should you sign up for it. Now, TikTok commands a large audience.
But realistically, who does that?
I know. Yeah. It's a problem. And usually what happens is these are all things where, how does somebody make money on TikTok? Is it just like YouTube?
Kind of. TikTok actually pays influencers. They pay them between $1,500 to $2,000 per person to become influencers, and then keeps promoting them and getting more people onto the platform and things like that. That's what they do. And then, of course, once you become influencers, like, these 5 guys in Mumbai who got booked on sedition charges or something like that, they were entirely promoted by TikTok. And then they came to the notice of big celebrities like, who was that other guy who got thrown into jail, that big bodybuilder type fellow, Ejaz Khan or something. Right, they came to his notice, and from him, they came to, I think, Salman Khan's notice or something like that. And that's the way that particular system works.
So basically what you're saying is that the communist ideology is somehow trying to make a backdoor entrance via TikTok by having TikTok promote some of these left loonies. I can't find any other better word for it. I know I'm going to get flamed for it, but that's how I look at some of their statements and their behavior. So it looks like there's an attempt to try and reinforce communism in India.
Not really. See, the thing is, this is the difference between American and Chinese apps. The American apps are directly trying influence operations. The Chinese apps aren't actually trying influence operations. They do it sometimes because, during the election campaign, they put out advertisements on Facebook with doctored images and whatnot and things like that. But what they do is that they collect a whole load of weaponizable information on you. So tomorrow you get into a war with China or something like that, they will literally have the financial banking details, the telephone code details, your password to recharge your Airtel phone, your bank passwords, every password that you have, your email, your Gmail, everything, even the password of your own phone possibly, which they will weaponize and use against you at a later stage. They're doing it very differently. They are not really attempting influence operations, except this time during the elections they did. But the Americans definitely are. But see, that's an uncoordinated effort purely by companies. We have to make the difference here. What is visible, clearly visible now and being done by American companies, and what is a much bigger problem of the future basically being orchestrated by the Chinese government.
Well, interesting days ahead, Abhijit. And all I can tell you is that viewers need to be careful. Just by joining TikTok and watching their videos, would you still be placing your data at their disposal? I mean, the analytics, they will be able to find out what you like to watch and all that. What more is the damage?
See, the damage is, the good thing here is, if you're on an Apple platform, Apple examines your algorithms very, very carefully. So they're not going to allow you to do a lot of things. Android doesn't. Android is an open free form, right? Anybody can get in there. So there's absolutely no control on these Android platforms, and they will, in fact, end up, you really don't know what they're going to end up sucking from your phone. They could literally pick up the passwords when you type things in. You won't know about it because Android doesn't really have a proper quality control, this thing on the App Store.
Yes, and viewers, I know a little bit about this. So if you will permit me, Abhijit, I just want to clarify a few things about Android. Viewers, Android software is free. So essentially the cell phone manufacturer, what they do is they go to the companies like Qualcomm and other chipset vendors. These chipset vendors would make a reference design of a phone that does calling, and it will have a bare bones version of Android put on top of that to do something like a proof of functionality. I mean, like, for example, it might show the manufacturer that, okay, you can make 3G, 2G, GSM, 4G, LTE, and 5G calls on this particular reference design. Here you go and run with it. So it's up to the manufacturer. And I know there are people called ODM, original device manufacturers. These are different from original equipment manufacturers, and then the retail. So what you see in retail, like like LG and Xiaomi and all that, this is the retail product. Behind them, there are something called as original equipment manufacturers, and behind them is the original design manufacturers. And behind them is the chipset guys who are giving the reference design. So it goes through all these layers. Most likely, each places there is something more getting added. So at the end of the day, what you are giving up in terms of cost is your privacy. Yes, Apple phones are more expensive. Apple computers are more expensive. I'll also tell you this. Apple devices are less susceptible to viruses, hacking, all across the board. I've rarely seen a Mac being brought down or data being sucked out of a Mac because of a virus intrusion. For some reason, they've got their system act in place. I'm not saying that it's zero, but it is on a corresponding scale, it is a lot less. So the call is yours. What do you want? You want security, safety, especially those who probably are using extensive online purchasing, merchandising. When you start having high net values, like you're buying a TV, which is in thousands of rupees, then that's when people start looking at you as an interesting person, because it appears as if you are spending more money, and therefore you are more liable for hacking. So that is the decision call you need to make. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so at every one of those stages, the chipset manufacturer, the design manufacturer, the equipment manufacturer, and finally the brand, you have the possibility of hardwiring in malware or spyware.
Yes.
Right? That is one. The second is the apps themselves. Even if the phone is designed without any malware or spyware, the app itself could introduce a malware or a spyware into your phone.
Yes.
Which is the most dangerous aspect of this, because in many cases, they will actually, a lot of manufacturers themselves are very worried, because if somebody detects it, it becomes a huge class action lawsuit against them. It becomes a national sort of whatever against them, and they're very scared to do that. So it's usually the apps are the more preferred path to compromising your phone and your privacy.
Right, right. And therefore, so what you have to be careful about what you install. I mean, if a phone is there with you because you want to make phone calls, period. I mean, you can do some browsing and be careful about the less known apps. And sometimes these apps will have other things piggybacking on them. So the point of all this is Android is what DOS used to be, an open thing, free for all. You can do whatever you want. And therefore, you're also giving up a lot of your privacy. Thank you very much, Abhijit, for sharing your thoughts. We'll be back with more such interesting conversations.
Thank you. Jai Shri Ram.
Jai Shri Ram.